I just finished my 60-day high-fat carnivore challenge. This was a 2-month challenge, and I had good results and some bad results. We're going to go over it now. Hey, what's shaking bacon? My name's Bruno Panucci. I hope you're doing well. So why would I do a high-fat carnivore challenge? This was 90% of my calories coming from fat and 10% from protein. Now, I don't typically go by calories when it comes to my food intake. I just go by how I feel on a carnivore diet. I did that, and it served me really well. I lost 160 pounds doing that. But what happened was I hit a stall. I hit a stall at about 150 pounds. So after a while, I switched to a high-fat carnivore diet of an 80-20 ratio. I did that over 6 or 8 months ago. And I noticed it moved my weight around. I initially put on weight, and then after a while, I lost a little more than I started at. So I got up to 160-pound weight loss doing that. But I plateaued again. And then I went on vacation, had a bit of dairy, put on 10 pounds. I didn't eat anything off a carnivore diet, but dairy has that effect on some people. And it had that effect on me. So that 10 pounds stayed. And I found out after I got back into Canada, when I got some blood work done, that my fasting insulin was high. So that's after 2+ years on a carnivore diet, my fasting insulin was high. It was at 260 millimoles or 255 millimoles. In Canada, the cutoff is 180. So if you divide that number by 6, that gives you Americans roughly an idea of where I was. So I thought, okay, I have to do something. This is not good. So my body is still very insulin resistant. But here's the thing with insulin. It's not a switch that turns on and off. It's something that gets better and worse. It ebbs and flows. It comes in waves. It gets a little better, and it doesn't mean it's perfect. It's just better. And I knew going into this carnivore way of eating, I had fasting insulin problems. So I started on berberine, but I don't want to rely on a supplement to do this. So I found out a 90-10 ratio from Dr. Elizabeth Bright is a good way to go to help manage insulin resistance. She feels, and I want you to keep this in mind, the reason why I'm doing this high-fat version of carnivore is I have hypothyroidism. I have a history of gout and insulin problems. So 2 of those problems are guaranteed hormone issues, insulin and hypothyroidism. A high-fat diet, from what Dr. Elizabeth Bright says, helps people to heal their hormones, gives the fuel to the body. Now, I also started taking iodine near the end of this. It takes a while to get it. I got Lugol's iodine, and I've tried iodine in the past for a number of years, but it honestly didn't really do too much because I was getting cheap quality stuff. Now, Lugol's iodine is tough to get. I had to get it off Amazon, and it's very expensive for something as simple as iodine. Now, when I started this high-fat version of carnivore, I was at 314 pounds. Imagine that. I still had 150 pounds at one point on top of that. I was 465 pounds at one point. So I already accomplished quite a bit on this carnivore diet. I needed to get past this plateau, and it seemed like a good way to go. So I found out about Dr. Bright through Kelly Hogan. Now, I honestly feel like this was a way that I was going to start healing my body. And you have to keep in mind, it doesn't happen all at once, and it doesn't always work the way we want it to. So here's one of the negative things that would steer most people away from doing this way of eating. I put on, I think at least 40 pounds. 40 pounds in 2 months. That is a lot of weight, even for a big guy like me. I found that out when I went and weighed myself a week ago, almost a week ago. It was 5 days ago. I went for a sleep study because it turns out I still wake myself up at night from not breathing, even though I have a CPAP machine. And they had to weigh me there. It was one of those old style scales where you move the weight around. And I topped it at 350 pounds. And I was like, oh man, I knew I put on weight. I thought maybe 20, 30 pounds tops, but I put on over 40 pounds. So when I put it to 350, it didn't even tip. And it showed I was probably at least 5 or 10 pounds more than that. I started cutting back after 1 month because I was eating a lot, probably too much, because I was making sure I was at this 90-10 ratio. And one of the theories with eating fat is you can go all day long and eat all the fat you want. It's not going to create an insulin spike at all, or even a bump, barely more than a bump. That much fat is clearly enough to wreak havoc on my insulin levels. This is something I wasn't too worried about, to be honest. I was putting on weight. I didn't want to see it go in that direction, but I half expected it to go in that direction, just not that extreme. But that didn't bother me because I figured, like last time, that weight would just drop off very quickly. So while I was experiencing this negative consequence with the weight, I had other non-scale victories that I'm quite satisfied with. Now, I had red toe all the time at the base of my big toe. It was always red, like it was inflamed. It wasn't really swollen, but it was red. And I have a history of gout, and that's the foot I was often getting gout attacks in. And doing this high-fat version of carnivore, that disappeared. It's virtually gone. And I can't believe it, because that was an issue I've had for years. It didn't hurt, because the last time I had a gout attack was 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago. I'm very impressed with that, because clearly my metabolic syndrome is still getting better. I only have technically one symptom left of metabolic syndrome, and that's being overweight. So after a month of doing this high-fat version of carnivore, I noticed I wasn't as hungry. So I actually cut back a little bit on my fat, making sure I was sticking closer to a 90-10 ratio, because I was doing 90-10 at least for the first month. After about 3 more weeks, I noticed it was a struggle to get 5 small meals in a day all the way through this. If I didn't do an aggressive workout, it was too much for me. Simple as that. I was stuffing myself. I was forcing that last meal. The good news is when I have enough food in my diet, I sleep really well. But I notice when I start to not get enough food, my sleep suffers. So by the last week of this, and this is during that week that I weighed myself at over 350 pounds, all of a sudden I noticed I wasn't bloating as much. Yeah, I was bloating on a high-fat diet. How is that even possible? But my upper stomach was bloating. It wasn't my lower stomach. It was my upper stomach. It was sticking out a little too far. And I thought, why is this happening? So there's probably something digestively that's going on there. And maybe I wasn't absorbing fat as well as I could have. I was trying a digestive enzyme through a lot of this. Another thing that changed was on the anterior portion of my foot, on my right foot, I had a little nodule. I don't know if it's a cyst or a buildup of uric acid, but it's a little bump, kind of like there's a little tic tac sticking up from under my skin. And that went away probably by about 50% on the days I was doing a fat fast. So a couple days into my first month, I did a fat fast here, just one day, fat fast there. And I noticed, hey, that's gotten better. And I thought that was quite fascinating. That's probably about 50% of the size that it was. So I was getting some non-scale victories, even though my weight was going up. So you have to kind of weigh everything. After this, I was wondering why this just wasn't working at 90-10. I was probably getting 80 to 100 grams of protein per day, and this just wasn't working. I was like, okay, am I having issues with my glycagon? Am I having issues with some other hormone? I thought maybe it was my thyroid, so I'm in the process of getting my thyroid tested. My TSH is virtually non-existent, so it turns out I might have Hashimoto's disease. So I'm looking into getting that diagnosed or proving that I don't have it. So here's the crazy thing. The last few days of this way of eating, the last week, I started losing weight, and I'm losing weight fast. I mean, really fast. I had dropped down to 4 meals a day that last week, because that 5th meal, I thought, you know, why am I pushing something like this? I usually try and stay more in tune with my hunger signals. And I thought 4 meals a day is just what I'm going to do. So now I had specific ratio of fat to protein, and I was making sure to only get 4 meals a day instead of 5. And sure enough, after I left the sleep clinic a couple days later, I weighed myself, and I was on Sunday night, so that's 3 days later, I was 338 pounds. The next morning, I weighed myself after that, Monday morning, and I was 331 pounds. This morning, I weighed myself. I'm 328 pounds. So the weight loss is finally coming. So I'm going to go back to this, but in the meantime, I'm doing a 3-day sardine challenge, and I'm going to make a video about that later in the week. So there were good and bad things that happened to me on this high-fat version of carnivore. I felt really good. My sleep was much better, especially when I was getting a lot of energy in my diet. And I noticed off-scale victories. Now, the weight started coming down, and I'm interested to see where this is going to go in the next few months, because when I finish this sardine challenge, I'm going to go back to a high-fat version of carnivore. So those are my results. I hope this doesn't discourage anyone from doing a high-fat diet. Most people that do a high-fat diet lose weight. I happen to be one of the few that put on weight. I think I was eating too much, and my body just didn't react well to that. My body took a while to understand what was happening to it while I was trying to get fat adapted. So anyway, thanks for tuning in. If you like this video and you found it informative, I hope you can hit that little bell and subscribe button. I really appreciate it. And leave a comment with what works for you with carnivore. Is regular carnivore good for you when you just eat what you want, whenever you want, as long as it's on a carnivore diet? Or does it work well for you if you do lower fat or higher fat? Does it work well if you switch between them all? Keep me posted. Let me know. Thanks a lot and take care.